Welcome to another episode of Quantum Growth for Financial Advisors. It is your host, John Cutton, and I am super excited to have a world-renowned, I'm going to say at this point, guest today, and somebody who I've admired from afar for many, many years, who truly has had an unbelievable impact on my own business. And to our listeners, I often quote and speak about and reference the amazing books and thought leadership that Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, has accomplished throughout his life. And I could not be more pleased that Dan has agreed to be on our podcast today, and I'm delighted to have him here. So with that being said, Dan, thank you for being our guest today. Can't wait to get to know you a little bit better today. And I was hoping you could say a quick hello to our audience.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, John, and thanks for the invitation. And you send a very informative letter to set this up, and I just want to congratulate you on your incredible growth rate. I'm very familiar with what assets under management mean, and I more or less have a sense of what the baseline is and how you translate that. But you're doing wonderfully well. And I had when I first started coaching, just to give you a little background on me, I started coaching in 1974. So next year is 50 years. So I was a copywriter with a big ad agency called BBDO, one of the top, certainly one of the top 10 networks in the world. But I was in the Toronto office. I'm from the States. I grew up a farm boy in Northern Ohio, and I've always been sort of late doing things. So I got a job out of high school and did some college, some part-time college, and then went off to an outward bound program in the UK, 1964. Came back and I was going to get another job, and then sooner or later I was going to make enough money to go to college, full time. But I got drafted right when Vietnam started, so I spent 2 years in South Korea. Enjoyed it. I thought, I had a lot of people have a bad Army career. I had a good one. Then I came back, and then I went back to college. I had the GI Bill, so it paid all my expenses, and I borrowed all the money. And talking about 1967 dollars here, but I borrowed all 4 years and paid it back about 7 years after I got out. But I had a friend who lived in Toronto. That's where I'm talking to you from today. And he ran the agency that hired me. And we got talking, and it was just one of those things, where you just connect with someone. And he said, well, you're graduating next June. What are you going to do? And I said, who knows what they're going to do when they graduate from college? And he said, I think you have a gift for words, and maybe you'd think about becoming a copywriter. And he said, essentially, I'll give you a 6-month contract. It'll get you across the border, which really was all you needed in those days. Quite a bit more difficult these days. And so I came up in 71. So I've been in Toronto for 52 years. And but I always had this thing about coaching ever since I was young. I liked asking people questions about what they were up to, and whether they learned from their experience. And what they did in the agency, they took all the little clients or fee-for-service clients, and they put them in one group, and all the clients they weren't making money from, they gave them to the person they weren't paying anything. So it was a good matchup. But they were usually family-run businesses. It was not corporate. It was they had Kraft, they had Chrysler, they had some really big corporations. But these were small clients, and I could see right off the bat that their problem really wasn't something that could be solved by advertising. It's just that they weren't very, very clear about the future that they were trying to create. And family businesses tend to get into a sort of a groove, and they the founder sort of grows the business, and then the second generation, third generation are just employees of the owner. And so they started making requests. They were going to have a retreat on a Saturday, and would I come out and just ask questions? And I'm also an artist, so I could draw diagrams, and that's where it got started. And after about 3 years of this, I just decided that I could create a business out of this. And so I started in '74. So next August, it'll be 50 years that we've been doing the coaching work. So
Amazing. That's
yeah,
an amazing
yeah.
story. And
I'm well renowned because I'm the only one still alive.
well, you started coaching when I was born, so I'm 50 years old myself,
Yeah.
Dan. And I love the story that you just shared of how you got started. And one of the things we talk quite a bit about in my own business and on the podcast is kind of that second generation, right? Where you may lose that entrepreneurial spirit. So I totally connect. And one of the things that you shared, I'd love to go even a little bit deeper on. So I've got this saying, and my listeners, I say it a lot, right? And it's this concept of simple, complex, simple, right? And I think it was it Oliver Weldon Holmes, I believe, who had this saying that said, "I wouldn't give a fig for simplicity on the near side of complexity, but I give my right arm for simplicity on the far side of complexity." What I actually now call profound simplicity.
Yeah.
And I can share, Dan, one of the things I like to kind of, connect the dots backwards a little bit, right? And I know you talk about that sometimes as well. I probably learned it from you, quite frankly. But when I think about kind of measuring backwards and I go back, I can connect the dots backwards in my own career and think about your words, by the way, what my 10 times or 10x activities were. And one of the things that you have the most amazing gift, and I really truly believe this, that I've witnessed, is you've got this ability to take really complex things, because being an entrepreneur and growing a business is hard work. It's very complicated until it's not, right? And then it just gets really, really simple.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is when I think about your three, what I believe are most recent books, right? Who Not How, The Gap in the Gain, and then most recently, 10 times is easier than 2 times. Do you call it 10 times or 10x, by the way? What do you call it?
10x, 10x is easier than 2x.
Okay, interchangeable. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure
Yeah.
what you called it, but I actually usually call 10x is easier than 2x as well, which I highly recommend and have to many. But when I think about the books that you've written, you make the complex so simple. And one of the things that I wanted to go into with you today, so in my own organization, I believe I'm a 10x thinker, but to your point, that next generation
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily think that way in my business. And I'm trying to, we had everybody read the book and we bought 100 of them for our employees and partners, et cetera. And it's become very evident to me that it's just a different mindset and a different way of thinking. And I'd love for you to just pontificate on your thoughts, because you've seen it a lot more, obviously, than any of us listening at.
Yeah, well, and we can use you as the example here, is that before people run into the 10x is easier than 2x, they say 10x, how could I do that? Because they're imposing their present complexity on the future. Yeah, and I mean, there is complexity even if you've done a good job of simplifying, because the world is changing. I mean, you just think about the last 4 years and what life has been like for the last 4 years. The world changed, and I think we're in a much bigger change now, because the US as a country, which has basically made the global economy possible with the US Navy, basically the global economy and global market only exists because of the US Navy. And that is that they've guaranteed trade routes, and 90% of all world trade is on water. And so the US Navy has just made bringing something by water anywhere in the world to anywhere world, they've made it safe, reliable, and they've made it incredibly cheap. And the US just has decided that they or probably over the last 5 presidents. Since the Soviet Union collapsed in 91, 92, um, uh, the US has been paying for the global economy through the military budget, and the US is an easy market to sell products into. And I think that more and more the US is just saying, we've spent the last 75 years basically guaranteeing everybody else's prosperity. I think we'll just come back to America and make America prosperous.
Sure.
And that is like changing the whole game board. There'll be a whole new set of rules. So and that really shows up in the financial services markets first. The financial markets are the canary in the coal mine, because it has to do with how cheap or how expensive things are. And I am just writing a new book called The Great Meltdown, and MELT is a acronym, and it's cost of money, cost of energy, cost of labor, and cost of transportation. And I would say for the next 25 years, all 4 of those are going to be more expensive. So people's idea how they handle their finances and how they handle their investments is going to go through a complete change. And we've had very cheap money, very cheap energy, very cheap labor, very cheap. Since you've been in business, basically, that period from when you got into business to today has been the cheapest global period in the history of the world, and it'll never be that way again. But things are going to be very, very good in the States.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah, so that's basically. So, but going back to your question about the 10 times, is that anybody who would work with you, whether they're a customer, whether they're a partner, or whether they're an advisor in your firm, has gone through 10 times many times in their life. The way I approach this in the workshop, when people are in strategic coach program, I simply say, well, tell me what your top line is right now. So say somebody said, well, I'm at $1 million right now. And I said, so tell me what was going on when you were at 100,000.
Right.
Okay. And how many years ago was that? And, most people, if they're successful and they're talented and they're ambitious, it was, let's say 20 years ago, they were at 100,000. Now they're at $1 million. And I said, now, if you just arbitrarily broke that down into 5 growth stages, what would the 5 growth stages be? Okay. And it's never continuous. It's usually they're sudden events. It's a sudden customer. Okay. And then when they get a sudden customer who is bigger than they ever had, well, that bigger customer knows other customers like that on a normal basis. Sure. And they say, yeah, that's what happened. I got this guy, and then he introduced me to all these people or this family, and they introduced me. Could have been technological, could have been a break. Zoom has been wonderful for us, and I think it's wonderful for you. I mean, think about a $10 million check, John. 2019, you could only get that in person.
Exactly right.
Now people have no trouble with DocuSign and getting a $10 million check. So the technological can be one of those events where you take a sudden jump. And then team members, people you get on staff, you get really great team members that free you up, the who, not how concept. And you jump. And they said, well, that's right, I did do that. And so I say, so would you say, based on the last time you went 10 times, that you at least know 50% of what it'll take to go the next 10 times? And they say, oh my golly, yeah, I do. So one of my approaches is I never ask people to look at a bigger future until they've given themselves a more confident past. Entrepreneurs are the worst when it comes to the past because most entrepreneurs are trying to get away from their past.
True story. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, Dan, and again, you're doing a little coaching session with me here without knowing it, is Sometimes I'll go back to, right, your book, The Gap and the Gain. It's kind of that measuring backwards, right, connecting the dots backwards and being able to say, well, where was I? You make a good point. I am like a lot of entrepreneurs, hard on myself. Most of my life is in the gap, and I see the things that I could fix, and don't always, right, look backwards and go, man, look how far I've actually come. But what I'm hearing you say is maybe sometimes entrepreneurs think about that next 10x move,
Yeah.
and in your mind, it's how do I go from 1 million to 10 million? And it might be the building blocks. It's a different 10x thing, right? And they kind of present themselves, and it's about how you're approaching how you actually invest your time
Yeah.
on a daily basis.
Yeah, all growth is expanding four freedoms. I've been coaching entrepreneurs now for 50 years. Next year it'll be 50 years. And people who aren't entrepreneurs don't understand entrepreneurs. Okay, because in their mind, the only thing that drives entrepreneurs is what they can see about the entrepreneurs. And it usually comes down to money. They're just money crazy. But I find that once entrepreneurs hit a certain level of growth, they don't even talk about money anymore. The growth are other issues. And my contention is that entrepreneurs are become entrepreneurs in the first place, and they're motivated to grow as entrepreneurs because of freedom. And there's four freedoms: freedom of money, freedom of time. Freedom of time is number one. You got to get more freedom of time. Number two is freedom of money, and that's got two aspects to it. It's quantity of money, obviously, that's one, and the other one is quality of money. Am I making money in a way that really pleases me? Because I know people who work for big checks, but they hate the way that they make the money. They hate the business they're in. They hate who they have to deal with. And that leads you to the third freedom, and that is freedom of relationship. That everybody you're working with backstage, you really like working with them, and everybody in the front stage, customers, clients, vendors, strategic alliances. You're using accountants, which I think is a wonderful route for growing a financial, wealth management company, because the accountants really know where the money is.
Yeah, true story. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and the fourth one then is freedom of purpose. That what you're doing in your entrepreneurial life actually serves the bigger purpose of your human life. Okay, and if you improve one of those freedoms, then you have more resources for improving freedom of money. But freedom of time has to come first. And I would say even now where you are, John, that probably 20% of what you're doing on a, let's say, a quarterly basis is actually contributing to the next 10 times growth of your company. And 80% is you're just maintaining what you have.
Yeah.
I would look at you as the growth factor in your company. It's how we free up John. If we free up John, the rest of the company will get freed up.
Yep. So it's funny. I have a partner, Dan. His name is Jake Dunlap, and I have what I call my thinking chair, right? Which is I've got a great big hill in my backyard, and on the top of my great big hill, there's a Adirondack chair, and it looks out at the pool and the waterfall. And Jake says his number one job is to get me 2 days a week to just sit in my thinking chair, and if I get some time to think, good things happen, and he'll go kind of execute, right, and integrate on the backside of things. So I love what you said when you talk about the freedom of time, right, and you talk about the freedom of money. I love the two types of money, enough of it, and then actually, I would say, in my words, enjoying what you do, actually feeling good about the way in which you earn money, and then thinking about relationships, working with people that you like, and then it's interesting you talk about purpose, and this is again, selfishly, what I love about kind of your just introspective of what goes on in entrepreneurs' lives is you are kind of describing where I am, right? And I think a lot of our listeners, we have very successful advisors who listen, and they've achieved a level of success, but still not necessarily happiness, right? And to
Yeah.
be vulnerable, that was me. I mean, I love my wife and my kids, and I had a great relationship and continue to, but there was still something missing. And a lot of what it was a sense of purpose of
Mhm.
great,
Mhm.
I worked my butt off. I've achieved a level of financial success. I love the people I work with, but I wanted to give back more, right? And
Yeah.
one of the things, Dan, I've recently launched is something we're calling the Financial Advisor Success Syndicate, which our listeners know about. And it's free. It's free information to financial advisors all around the country. And we went out and we kind of partnered with 6 industry leaders and myself in different areas that a financial advisor could need, almost like a family office for financial advisors. Some of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
focuses CPA partnerships or mergers and acquisitions, marketing, so on, et cetera. And it's the thing I'm most excited about right now. And it's actually
Well,
it's a 10x activity for me long term.
well, I'm going to oppose your idea of giving back. I don't believe in giving back.
Okay.
Uh, and the reason is you didn't take anything, you created something. Okay. And why is it the public always talks to people who actually created their wealth? Why are they always talking about giving back? You know? So
Yep.
I don't believe in giving back. I believe in expanding your happiness and sharing your prosperity, but I don't believe in giving. I don't think you owe the world anything.
Yep. No, thank you.
I think you, I mean, you're lucky. You have 50% of being born in the States and being a wealthy manager is ending up a wealth manager is good luck. You know, it's good luck. It's good luck. But I don't believe I have to give anything back to the world. But there are ways that I want to share my success, and there's ways I want to share my prosperity. So I just like to nip that because I think the giving back thing is an obstacle to growth.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think if it comes, my view at least would be if it comes intrinsically, right? So like I do it because it's selfish. It actually makes me feel good to help people. And that's something that I actually enjoy doing. I have to assume, you certainly, from everything I've read, seen, heard, and listened to, it seems like you genuinely like to help entrepreneurs and help
Oh
people
yeah,
see things that they wouldn't see on their own.
yeah. Well, entrepreneurism is, as a thing that people talk about is fairly recent in the world. It only goes back about 200 years that there was actually a class of individuals called entrepreneurs. And I mean, you had merchants and you had people, but they didn't see themselves as a separate class, really. Okay. And it didn't happen until there was steam power. So all of human history, and it's very interesting, the first breakthrough in steam power that really created the Industrial Revolution happened in March of 1776. You may know that year. It's famous for other possibilities. And it was it was the first steam engine that returned 25% greater energy than it consumed. And
Mm.
that's a huge exponential multiplier. And then all of a sudden you see this mad rush of nobodies who all of a sudden get an idea for using steam power. And then all of a sudden this different class of people who got rich in ways that other people thought weren't appropriate. Uh, and started saying, they're not from the right families, they don't have the right education, who do they think they are that they can just go out and make money? Well, what they are is really useful. And so that really has started. And of course, the declaration was in July of that year. But I think it was in May or June that Adam Smith, who is considered the sort of the grandfather of capitalism, wrote the book called The Wealth of Nations. And he defined a very fundamental principle there, and that was the principle of comparative advantage, that you do what you're great at and somebody else does what they're great at, and you just trade. You just trade. You don't compete with them on what they're great at.
Right.
You just do what you're great at and then trade with each other. And he says this is how wealth is created. But it wasn't possible really till you had steam power, and you could start giving some real multiplier breaks in different parts of the economy.
Yeah.
And it started in Holland was the first country that really operated that way, and then Great Britain was the next one, and then the U.S. is the prime. U.S. is really a entrepreneurial republic. It was designed to engender entrepreneurism because all the founding fathers basically had their own businesses.
Yeah, I love how you tie it back to history. I mean, you've
Yeah.
gone deep to kind of think about and really study where it's all come from.
Well, there's only been two entrepreneurial presidents of the United States. The first one and the one who got beat in 2020. Those are the only two actual entrepreneurs that we've ever had.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep. Very, very interesting the way you tie that together. When you're talking about the story that you just shared, is that kind of how you think about free zone partnerships when you're thinking about what you described a little bit?
Yeah, you don't compete, you just collaborate, and you're not doing the same thing. So the way I would look at it, for example, your collaboration with accounting firms, okay?
Mhm.
So you have to start in the center with who's the customer here, okay? And all customers live in a 360-degree world,
Mhm.
okay? And you're a slice of the pie, but they have a lot of other slices of the pie. So they need a great accounting firm, and the accountant isn't going to do wealth management, okay? Accountant's going to tell them whether they have any wealth to manage, but they're not going to do the wealth management.
Sure.
So it makes total sense that you would collaborate with accounting firms because you're not competing with each other, okay? And you want all your customers to have great accountants. So, that's a match. And then there's all sorts of other things that people need. I mean, that's where family offices come in. I mean, family offices don't do just wealth management. They do the management of the entire organization of the family, and link them in with others. So there's another collaboration there. I think financial services is probably one of the easiest industries to have collaborations in with who you're not. They need a great architects. People need great architects. They need great landscapers. They need great interior designers. They need all those, and all those can be collaborative because you're in love with the same end user. That's what holds the collaboration together. Both of you are committed to the well-being and the growth and the happiness of the person in the center.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I see a lot of times, financial advisors, entrepreneurs in general, sometimes the parties who are trying to build what you call a free zone partnership have a hard time not keeping score, right? And they're kind of the adage of, well, what's in it for me? And I gave you one. And what happens if it's not even? I know you've had a lot of experience in helping entrepreneurs build those type of partnerships. I mean,
I have a lot of my own. I have about 7 or 8, of my own. Do you know John Bowen? Do you know who John Bowen is?
I do. Yeah, I know John. I don't know him personally, but I know a little bit about his program.
Well, he's in the free zone part of our program, and we have a collaboration. So every year we're going to come out with a survey. The survey, I think, goes out in about 2 weeks. This year's survey, okay, and the survey is called Entrepreneurial Wealth, and it's just how entrepreneurs look at wealth and what kind of help they get with their advisors and how they have it structured and what they have in place. And so we do a survey, and we do 1,000 that he's identified, and then we do 1,000 strategic coach clients. Okay, and then we'll bring out a survey every year that goes through all the financial networks and everything else, and that starts this year. And but John owns the research company who does this, and all the money that comes from the research goes to John. But I get this great capability of being able to do a survey And all I have to do is consult on the questions that I thought would be meaningful for the survey. And then we don't let anybody get in touch with our clients. So we will send the survey out to our client. We have about 2,500 active clients in the program right now. So we'll start at the top and go down. And then every year we'll have the benefit of this survey that we can use for our own purposes. And the books you mentioned, the 3 books, Who Not How, The Gap, and The Gain, and 10 times is easier than 2 times. That's all a collaboration with other writer, Ben Hardy, and with Hay House Publishers. So I write small books. I write a new book every quarter. I got these little books. Just recording. So when I was 70, John, I set a goal that in the next 25 years, I was going to write 100 books in 100 quarters. And we just started quarter 36, and this is book 36.
Amazing.
And but the little books are interesting because some of them can become big books. So 3 of the big books are the Who Not How, and the other 2 are both little books that became big books. And I can't write big books because if it can't be done in 90 days, I'm not going to do it. Where's my Adderall? I've got to get
a little attention span. I can relate for sure.
Where's my Adderall? And anyway, so this writer who was the #1 writer on Medium, and he just started in Strategic Coach, and he said, "You don't write big books, do you?" I said, "No, I just don't have the persistence that would allow me. And plus, I don't want to deal with a publisher. Publishers have their own, they're like assembly lines, and you have to get here. And, I just, that's not an activity." But what happened is there was an arrangement made with the publisher that all the money from the book went to the other writer. So he got all the advances, he got all the royalties that come from the book. I don't make a cent from the book. And the reason is my money comes from people reading the book and signing up for a Strategic Coach. Sure. And the first 3 books were right about the 600,000 mark for the first 3 books right now.
Wow.
And I would say they've been directly responsible for 100 signups for the program, where people read the book and they signed up for the program. But then there's probably another 500 or 600 who were influenced by the book. We were already in contact with them, but when they got the book, it was another nudge. It was another nudge. So it's wonderful marketing, and I didn't write the books, but I was interviewed for every idea that's in the book. And then our clients were made available to the writer that he could interview the writers and talk about them. So that would be a case of collaboration. Okay. I couldn't do it on my own. Okay. And he has to be paid. So I said, well, let's just take the publisher's money and give it to the other writer. So
yeah, no, so totally get it. And I've listened to you talk and read about you talk about that a little bit. And I guess for our listeners, it's one of the things, the reason I had asked the question is one of the keys to my success has actually been these free zone partnerships.
Oh, yeah.
The CPA piece and relationships with recruiting.
And you don't keep score.
Right, exactly right. And it's just 2 business owners helping each other. Both sides grow their own businesses, and there is no score.
Yeah.
But you get the influence, right, of what that other person's unique ability is.
You get their entire network. Plus, you get their skill. You get their skill. I mean, if I had a choice between money now or long-term capability, I'll always go for the long-term capability.
Sure.
If you have the capability, you can make the money. If you have the money, you don't necessarily have the capability.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Yep, exactly right. So, Dan, when you think about what you call the entrepreneurial, what do you call it? The entrepreneurial time system, right? Yeah. Is what you call it. And I know that's a system that you've run for a long time and taught thousands and thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs, maybe millions at this point. Do you find that as you think about those different days that that's where this work occurs, and that the
This,
entrepreneur
well,
can be.
this is where the freedom of time comes from. Okay. So, for example, Babs Smith is my partner, and we're married. We've been married for 30, this year it's 30.
Oh, you better know this one, Dan. I don't want to get you in trouble in my own
I
podcast.
can tell you exactly. It was June, June 20th of 1996, 1986. And, but we're partners, and we have a complete division of labor in the company. I run the program and she runs the company. So I'm responsible for what goes on stage and she's responsible for the theater.
Right.
Okay. And we, as it was a marriage and a partnership made in heaven, and I'm very grateful for it. Okay. But the one thing I had never had in my life before I met Babs was free days.
Mhm.
There was no day when I wasn't working,
Yep.
doing some kind of work, and I'm not, I'm in the majority with that statement, you know. And she said, well, I remember it was the second year, and she says, we're going to go to Cape Cod for 2 weeks. And I said, I just got too much to do. I can't go for 2 weeks. And she said, well, you just simplified the future. She said, you either take free days with me or you work alone.
There you go. Sounds about right.
I had a practice marriage before this, and I had decided not to have another practice marriage, and but what I began to realize was that, and this seems very contrarian to most people, that if you double the amount of free time, actual free time that you take, you'll double your income. Okay, okay. And so this year, Babs and I will take the equivalent of 22 weeks off in free days.
Easy.
So I have 210 work days a year. And then, so the free days are free days. And I read novels, I read history, I exercise, we hike, swim, and everything else. But I don't do any work related activity when I'm on a free day. Okay. I really don't use cell phones at all. I think about 5 people have my cell phone number. And I have to every once in a while remember to make sure it's charged up. I tell you why I do it. I'm on Oura. I have my Oura ring, the
Yep.
Oura ring, and you got to have your cell phone charged
It has
up.
to sync up with something, right? That's
Synced
fun.
up, yeah. So
Yes.
that's 155 free days out of 365. So I have 210 work days, and all my goals for this year have to be achieved in 210 days. All my work goals. And there's 2 type of days I have. I have focus days, which are 3 activities: creating new concepts for the program, coaching, or doing any kind of marketing, which I would consider our Zoom call
Right.
here
Sure.
as marketing. And that's all I do. I have, if I'm in more than 3 company meetings a year, I ask for a congressional investigation. Why did, why? Because I have nothing to do with that side, but anything related to the creation of new material and and this is for the other coaches. We have 16 other coaches besides me. And so my job is to keep laying track in front of the locomotive. And then, I really took to Zoom. I really like Zoom, and I do podcasts, I do videos, I write books and everything, but that's all for marketing purposes.
Yeah, I know. I listen to and read all of them. So
Yeah.
they're super impactful, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So Dan, one
Yeah.
of the
Did that, I mean, you're asking the question about the entrepreneurial time system here. Had you come across that? Had you experimented with that, or you've mastered it?
I have, and I have not yet mastered the consistency of it. Like most entrepreneurs, I struggle with completely checking out on my free days. So I find myself scheduling them and then not necessarily, I have the system in place, but I don't necessarily hold myself as highly accountable as I likely should. But it's one of the things that I'm continuously
Well, the big thing is that when you first start taking free days, they have to be as tightly scheduled as your work days.
Mhm. Okay.
Because
Makes sense.
what throws entrepreneurs off is they like the structure. And work days are always structured, and then they have these free days and there's no structure. So they're tempted to
Check the computer and make the phone
yeah,
call.
because that's where the structure and that's where their applause is and that's where their teamwork is and everything. So, but their brain never has the possibility of new thoughts and new ideas unless you're completely freed up. And you can guarantee your brain for a whole day, I'm not going to do any business related. You can't regulate your thinking. You think about what you're going to think about. We don't have control of our thinking, but we do have control over our time.
Sure. Yeah, it's where, when you're in the shower, or you're taking the walk,
Yeah.
or listening to the music, or you're hiking, and that's usually right when
Yeah,
you're.
and all of a sudden a new idea. The other thing I do a little test with people. I say, how many of you are planning free days, but you don't want to go on the free days because you got too much to do? Okay. And every hand goes up. And I said, okay, now make a list of everything you would get done if you didn't go on free days. Just make a list. Okay. Now take the list and put it in a binder or put it into a drawer somewhere and go off and take the free days. And when you get back, first thing you do, take the list out. What's the difference in the list before the free days and after the free days? And they come back and they say, well, first of all, about 6 of them, I didn't even understand why I wrote it down.
Right.
The other thing is about 5 of them got solved before
Somebody else, right?
while I was away.
Mhm.
And of the other 9, I think only about 4 of them are important. And I says, good. By not working for 2 weeks, you solve 16 of the 14 of the problems.
Yeah, amazing. And you're then it's a
And
great
it's perspective. It's perspective.
it's a great segue. I wanted to make sure I spent a little time with you on is leadership, right? Because what you just described, it allows, right, your team to actually solve problems. So inside of my wealth management firm, we have a vision statement, and it's Cut and Wealth Management is not only a Barron's Hall of Fame practice, but we're known industry wide as a supercharged leadership development factory. We develop what we call level 5 leaders with an exclamation point. I always like to say at the end, right? So obviously, as you grow a business, any type of business, and it starts to expand, at some point you are then responsible for other, right, human capital. And as you develop your leadership skills, that's where I find a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck, is they can lead themselves, but they might struggle a little bit leading others in their organization. So just be curious, anything that you share around leadership in general.
Yeah, I'd like to make a distinction between the word control and the word charge. In control, in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Managers are in control.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders are in charge. Okay, so I make a distinction. And managers are responsible for maximizing what already exists.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders are for creating a whole new future where growth can happen. The entire role of a leader. So you mentioned that you had been front office, or you were in in the organization of Ameriprise from a managerial standpoint, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you didn't stay there long.
Nope.
And the reason is because you can't be a leader there; you can be a manager.
Yep. CEO's job to set vision.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I always I don't know if you've ever listened to our podcast with Peter Diamandis.
I have.
Yeah, Peter, is in our free zone program, so we have a collaboration with him. We jointly created an annual conference called Abundance 360, and I only had 3 rules for him that I would agree to do it because he was in the program. I said, first of all, you got to do it for 25 years.
Okay.
Okay. And I says, because if you do it for 25 years, you can really create something great. It gets better every year. And by the 25th year, it'll be world famous. It'll be great. And the second thing is all the money is yours.
Okay. Was it that quiet when you said that as well?
And then I said, the other thing, you have to own it 100%.
Wow.
And he said, and I said, now, Don't say yes right away. Go home and think about it. Talk to other people. It's got to be 25 years. And the thing that changed his mind was 25 years. He had never committed to anything for more than, 90 days or a year.
Sure.
And I said, you don't give yourself a chance to grow. Okay. So he's always talking about it. But I said, he says, well, what are all the CEOs in your program? What do they think about this? And I said, I don't have any CEOs in my program. My clients hire CEOs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you may have a business card that's CEO, but because you have to, who needs a business card these days? Anyway, so I said, no. I said, most people, when they talk about leaders, they're talking about hired guns. They're hired guns. I mean, corporate people don't own the companies. The head of Apple doesn't own Apple. He didn't start Apple. He didn't own Apple. He was a hired gun who was brought in. And I said, we don't have any CEOs in our program. And if they do, I'll talk to them about it, that they shouldn't be. So I'm in charge of the company. Okay. And what I mean is I'm always creating new ideas that are going to create a bigger future. So I equate the word charge to electricity. You're the person who gives that. And tell me if this is true or not true. Okay. As you've grown from 1 billion in assets to 9 billion in assets, it was mostly because you were out creating a bigger future through collaborations across the country.
1000%.
Yeah. And here's the other thing about being in charge. 85% of the most talented people on the planet, that's a 2 fact finder statistic, I made it up, but 85% of the most talented people in the world can't give a purpose for their talent. They need someone else to give them purpose. And I suspect you give purpose for a lot of people's talent.
Sure do. Yep.
That's leadership.
Yeah. No.
But you're not about telling people how to do things. Managers tell people how to do things. Leaders just say, this is what needs to get done. Apply your talent to it.
Yeah. Super well said. I always think about it as building a vision big enough for people to reach their goals inside of it, right? As long as they're connected to the vision, your words, it's their unique ability. And again, I attribute a lot of this thinking truly to you. But ultimately, if you give people a vision that inspires them.
I've got a new thinking tool for you. I'm going to do it to you right now.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Okay. So you're 50. So you're coming up on 5, or you are at 5 decades?
I am 50 already.
Okay, but you're in your
I've completed 5 decades.
Yeah. So here's the thing. If you look back at the 5 decades that you've lived, what was the best ever decade that you had?
I would honestly say my last decade has been my best, and I hope my next decade is even better.
Now here's a question on this is from 40 to 50 is your best decade. Okay. When you add up everything you've achieved, created and produced, from 40 to 50, was it not greater than everything you created before 40?
Oh, by 10 times.
Well, I'll be 80 next May, and what I've created since 70 is, from a creative, productive standpoint, is bigger than everything I created before 70.
Yep. Totally get it. Compounding, right? The more you learn, you've got that knowledge. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you just get to have a bigger and bigger impact when you have more and more people and clients and things to ultimately influence.
So what I want you to do now is go to 60, okay, and have everything that you created between 50 and 60 be bigger than everything you created before 50.
Yeah. That's the 10x thinking. I get it. And that is very much thanks to you, how I think, right? And, always trying to get in my thinking chair and I literally go, how would Dan think about this truly? And I look at it and it's connecting the dots to be able to see just how do you have a bigger impact And the bigger impact is just about influencing more of whatever it is you're trying to do. For me, it's more wealth management clients. In order for me to do that, why am I doing this podcast? Part of the reason is I want to give back to financial advisors. I said it. I knew you were going to say that. Not give back.
Share your progress.
Share my progress.
Yeah.
The more I share my progress, the more I think like I follow you. People will want to follow me and say, "Hey, I can learn from this guy. He's got a lot to offer," and maybe some of them want to join. Right, and that's at the end of the day. So, Dan, with that being said, I want to be respectful of your time.
Well, I'm fine. I'm fine as far as time wise. I was just checking on your time.
Oh, I'm good.
But what did you get that was new out of the conversation?
What did I get that was new out of the conversation?
Well, here's my question for the decade thing. And when you're 60, everything you achieve since 50, when would you stop?
Say that one more time.
Well, when you get to 60, and from 50 to 60, it's bigger than everything you created before 50. Mm-hmm. Okay. When would you stop?
Never.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good answer.
Answer. Yeah. Yeah. Never. Keep having an impact and have, and keep having fun with it. Right. I mean, that's the meaning of life, is just keep growing. And the more you learn, the better you get, the more people you can help along the way. And that to me is, the whole concept of, why do we play? We all want to win, but what's winning? Winning is being happy. And if being happy is helping people, then do more of it. Right. At the end.
Yeah, and some money will come along with that, and everything. Yeah. So what else that I was just following up on a question for that form, and I find that 10 years is a really good planning period. Okay. Okay. And so this is the kind of thinking we do in Strategic Coach. So. Yeah,
I love it, and it's why you're helping some of the best entrepreneurs in the world. As you meet people, you find a common thread, as many of them are working with you. So some top financial advisors that I already know that you coach that have talked about you. I know the folks over at Integrated speak so highly of you. So there's some pioneers in the industry that I know are being kind of built inside of your ecosystem with your your tutelage and support, which is fantastic.
Okay.
Dan, the
thanks for buying the books, by the way. That's great. You did that before before you invited me on the podcast, so I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure, and getting to chat with you today, Dan. What's interesting that I would share is, you've done such a great job of making all of your information available, right? That, I mean, I'll say it publicly. I would love to become the Strategic Coach client, which full fair disclosure, I have not been, but I've gotten so much value from just the free content that you put out there, your books, your podcasts, all of that material has made such a profound impact that to be able to get access not just to you, which is amazing, and your coaches, but I have to assume to your community of other entrepreneurs that just have different skill sets, because they're not, in my example, in the financial services industry. They might be in the widget, business, but they just have a different way of looking at the way that they've grown their business. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's some parallels. Is that something you find in Coach?
Yeah. First of all, it's life is very self-selective. That if you put out certain messages, it either connects or it doesn't connect. And so I've got a sneaky little trick here. If people say, well, if this is what I get without being in the program, I wonder what I get when. Yeah, and it's a lot more, because you're in a community of people who are sharing the language, they're sharing the concepts. But I want to leave one thing: what prevents 10 times growth? And because that's an important, is what creates 10 times. That's pretty straightforward from your history. But the thing that I find interesting is what happens when people stop. Why do they stop? And it's never because of what's happening in the business. It's what's happening in their personal life. Okay. And the people who are close to them in their personal life don't want them to grow anymore.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Totally get it.
Yeah.
Totally get
And
it.
they're being given the message. You're making everybody uncomfortable with your growth.
Yeah, totally get it. And I could just share to our listeners, I've seen it in my own life where I've outgrown some friends, I've outgrown some family, right? Where if you continue to develop in as an entrepreneur, as a person, your emotional competency, all of the things that you have to do to become a successful entrepreneur, ultimately people around you, sometimes if they're not the right people, are the ones that are actually telling you, what are you doing? You're working too hard and this is crazy, and what you've accomplished enough already, and what are you trying to do? And so I can totally relate to that. And I think, Dan, just a huge believer in mindset, right? And I think what you do unbelievably well is make it okay. I think these are your words, right? Entrepreneurs make things up and then make them real, right? I think that, right? Sometimes your words become confused
And
with my
then you need an
words.
organization. So yeah, you make it repeat.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly right. So when you think about that,
But
people,
Jack Dunlap is your make it real guy.
exactly right. Yep,
Yep.
exactly right. Yep, I make it up, he makes it real, and I think that's what Babs has been for you for all these years. And that's,
No, Babs isn't. Babs is the same profile as I am.
oh, is that right?
What Babs does is make up teams. She's really great at creating teams, and then the teams all have leaders, and then she just guides them. She's very wise, and she kind of guides them. She gives
That's
people a lot of confidence, but she's just as much a leader. She's not my go-to person.
amazing.
Okay, no, we got two. I don't know if you know the EOS system,
I
entrepreneurial.
do. We run on EOS, so I know.
So Jackson Integrator, right?
Yep.
Jackson Integrator. We're both visionaries. We're both visionaries, and we have three integrators among us. That was created inside Strategic Coach, by the way.
Is that right?
EOS. As a matter of fact, at 3 o'clock, I'm talking to the head visionary and head integrator for the entire EOS system.
Amazing. That I didn't know, and that's amazing. Yeah, but we've run on
Yeah,
EOS for
that was created over a 17-year period by a client inside. Gino Wickman was the creator of. Gino has been in coach for 25 years. Yeah.
I'm pointing. His book Traction is sitting right in my
Yeah, that's a great book.
right,
Yeah.
right over there. So it's amazing. So Dan, I have unbelievably thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I could keep you for another 3 hours, but I won't. Although I would love to. What I wanted to just kind of wrap with here, is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have, or that you might like to share? And if not, I'll just kind of wrap up and ask, where our listeners, although they all probably already know how to find you and where to find you, but where they can find.
Well, can I ask you a question? If would you invite me on another podcast so you can ask more of the questions?
Oh, yes, please.
You
Yes,
can do the 3 hours, but you can't do them consecutively.
yes, I would love to have you on. And
Just get in touch with Gord, because Gord does all my scheduling. But this is great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You went with the flow. A lot of people confine me to a series of questions, and then they get a series of answers, and then it doesn't go anywhere. But I think that yeah, we're resonant souls on the planet. I think this is good.
I appreciate that, and that means a lot to me. And yes, you have a invitation to come back whenever you like, as often as you like, and at any time that's convenient for you. So
Now, oftentimes we do it at big conferences where you just do a live Zoom. I don't travel for marketing purposes. I travel for free days, but I don't travel for
oh,
marketing.
wise man, I like that.
Yeah, but you can line it up with Gord, and if Gord lets you on, that means you pass muster. So he's my screener on this, and you approached it in the right way, and we had a great result out of it.
Well, that's fantastic, Dan. It was an absolute pleasure. I thank you for the kind words, and genuinely, you can't be more sincere. You've made a dramatic impact on my life. I widely share the things that I've learned from you, and truly, you've made a huge impact. So, on behalf of myself, my company, my family, genuinely, thanks for what you've done for entrepreneurs. Thanks for what you continue to do. It does make a very, very, very big difference in many people's lives, although they might not all become clients of the firm. Hopefully more do as a result of today. I know I will for sure. But ultimately, you're having an impact that's probably even bigger than you realize, because there's not a day that goes by that your name or something that you say or a book that you've written isn't actually referenced in my business or a training session that hundreds of other financial advisors are. So your impact is wide, and it's making a